You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
It's time to head south with the Fantha From Down Under. Here's your host, Adam O'Brien.
Welcome to the Fantha From Down Under, folks. How you doing? This is episode number 64, Cassian Anderrrr, and many other things. That's right. We do it Luthen style here on the Fantha From Down Under. I'm Adam O'Brien, of course, the Fantha From Down Under, or better known as the Lever Mullet also. And I'm talking to you, that's you, Star Wars fans out there, and Fantha Trackers, that's right, Star Wars news in a single file. That's why you're here, folks, because we're going to give you an Aussie slang on that too. Of course, coming to you from the Gold Coast in Australia, from Quinlan's Cantina, named after, of course, the great Jedi Knight, who's apparently still around, maybe. Oh, no, Mark can tell us that. Mark Newbold, how are you?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Oh, mate, it's just, you know, it's a baller. I tell you right now, I mean, Andor's really rejuvenated a lot of my love of what Star Wars was like in role playing, because we never used Jedi, because Jedi were kind of like, what's it like to be like Superman? Oh, there we go. Use the force push, you know, all that sort of stuff. Now you got real people like, you know, Luthen, who's got the coolest, what they call it, the Saber Starfighter or the Saber Freighter, whatever the hell he's got. It's the coolest damn ship in the lot. And of course, he says Cassian better than anyone. Under.
You're not wrong. You're totally right about the role play. Honestly, I need to speak to John Hicks soon, because we used to role play all the time in the late 80s. And this is so in that wheelhouse. It's not funny. It's like someone's nicked our scripts from back in the day. It really is. You're totally right. And you never used a Jedi back then. You never, I mean, some GMs did. More fool them, you know, trying to make a villain badder than Darth Vader or Boba Fett, or, you know, trying to make a guy cooler than Luke or Han or whatever. Doesn't work. So find your niche. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And yeah, Cassian Anderrrr is well worth discussing, I would say.
Yeah, Diego Luna surprises me. I've seen some of the stuff he'd done in, you know, early material here and there, and you know, he's a very good actor. I mean, he's for a young guy. You know, he's very capable. He does art house films and normal dramas and action and you know, thrillers as well. So he's got a well-versed palette of different stuff in his you know, his CV. But what I love about him is that he thrives on proper media res acting. Now, what I mean by that is in the moment, in the strife, in the middle of things, which really drives this fantastic, you know, Tony Gilroy scripted series. You know, it's not just, hey, the Force is like this and blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, the Sith is like this, blah, blah, blah. No. He's on the run from day one. He's in the thick of it. He's hiding. And, of course, he's interacting with people that don't really want to be in the sort of situation that he is. So he's a very conflicted character. That conflict is coming out in everything that he does with this very, I think, Born Identity feel to it, because we're kind of finding out who he is while he's taking care of business. I mean, the first episode, he knocks two guys down so quickly. You're kind of like, how did he know how to do that?
I think you make a good point in there, in that we're finding out who Cassian is, but we're also watching Cassian find out who Cassian is, because as the show's moved on, especially now we're on, as we speak, we're on sort of episode 9 as a couple of days come out. Excuse me. And even in there, you're starting to see leadership qualities come forward, knowing when to hold, when to fold. He's just sort of watching all the pieces fall into place until it's time to make the move. And we said this on Making Tracks and Reaction Chat the other day, how he's a far more patient man than probably even he realizes, you know. But I think that going back slightly to Luthen, I think Luthen has spotted a lot of this way out, because I think we're a few months down the line from sort of episode 1 of season 1, and we know that season 2 is broken into chunks and he's going to really bounce us down the timeline much quicker. But that being said, I think season 1 has moved us a fair bit, so it's really showing that Luthen has got an eye for identifying these kind of key characters, because we see the benefits of it in Rogue One. We know what's ahead for Cassian and where it ends. But at this point, even he's still, he's living in the moment, really, at the moment. He's just trying to figure out how to get out of this jail on Narconia 5. So fascinating stuff, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, we're watching him discover who he is as much as we're watching it happen.
It's great because now we also have obviously a Star Wars actor in this. Andy Serkis is one of my favorites. I mean, Andy's obviously known for a lot of his motion capture stuff, even within Star Wars. But people forget how good he was in The Prestige, and I mean other films. Like he's done that a heap of films, and obviously directed stuff too. I think one of the great things is that you've got such a versatile performer really coming in and doing kind of like a laborer's aesthetic in this. He is the foreman of this place. But, I mean, could they have at least just put a few lines in there? He goes, "You're in the assembly line, isn't you, precious? Call him.
I mean, the thing is, we've said this a lot, especially here in the UK, is there's a lot of the characters in the background and people that you're seeing come into the show are, especially to UK audiences, very familiar faces. Not to the degree that you go, there's John this or there's Jane that, but it's like, that's that guy from Vera last week. That's that fella that was in whatever. This week, the Doctor turns up and it's Harry Potter's dad, and there's like all these characters turn up that you're like, I know that guy. I can't place his name, but I know that actress. Where do I know them from? So in that sense, but that's beyond the realms of Star Wars or film Easter eggs. That's the real world recognizing of an actor, which Star Wars has always been pretty good at hiding, but now we're in a new era. You need the talent, don't you? You need these actors to come in, and they're all quality actors. All of them are quality actors. So there's that. But what I liked about Serkis, two things I really like. One, as you just rightly said, the performance is absolutely fantastic. And just sort of humble brag, I have actually seen next week's episode, and it gets even better. It's even better. So Serkis is nailing it in that sense. And also, I didn't know he was in it. It was one of those things, we all speak to people. We all hear stuff that, certainly for me, if I post it on Fantha Tracks, I'll be locked up in a darkened room for 3 months. So I never do. But you hear things, as we all do, talking to folks at conventions or just like this. Friends know things. People hear. You live near a film studio. You hear things. People hear things. But you don't post it or share it. I heard not a whisper of Andy Serkis. And I actually met Andy Serkis in the summer. Friend of mine, Ross Sandbridge, Ross, who was in Solo and Snoke's Double. Mm-hmm. I organised for Ross to meet Andy at London Film and Comic Con, and very brief hello and a handshake with Andy. But I've met him. That was kind of cool. And then took some really nice pictures of Ross with him. So that was cool. Had no inkling, and why would I? No inkling that he'd come back to Star Wars, not only in a role, because it'd be so easy to go, oh, he's obviously playing a motion capture guy or motion capture character. He's just worked on She-Hulk. The Imaginarium's just done work on She-Hulk. So he's kind of in with the Disney crowd in that sense. No, just a straight down, like you said, straight down the line, blue collar working guy in that lane sort of thing. Obviously, there's more to it in the prison than that. But as we see at the end of this episode, which is phenomenal. But just such a great performance. And I think that's what's making Andor stand out at the moment. Mulcaster said it. Mark Mulcaster made a great point the other day. In the immediate moment now, a lot of people are like, oh, Andor's so boring. Oh, it's so dull. And they're just dragging moaning about how terrible this brilliantly made and fantastically acted and really sharply scripted. You don't get that in Star Wars that often. Really sharply scripted show is. And Mark said, I think in 10, 15 years' time, the show from now that we'll be talking about more than any will be Andor. We'll look back and go, wow, that was explained in Andor. That came from Andor. That character was in Andor.
Hello, my name is Aidan Cook, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Mandalorian is fantastic. It's pulpy action, quick fun. There's loads going on. It's superb. No slight on Mandalorian at all. But I've got to say, I agree with Mark. I think in 10, 15 years' time, like we still think of Revenge of the Sith as being quality Star Wars content, I think we'll look back to Andor and go, wow, we were lucky to get that. Hopefully, we'll have had loads more since.
I think the thing is, we've had very action-packed sort of content. And this goes back to something I was chatting to somebody about on a Lethal podcast a couple of days ago. And one of the things is that, we're used to a post-Empire Strikes Back action-packed adventure with some exposition and some great stuff when it comes to the Force and all that. And George had changed things, and that's pretty much bang for buck action adventure set pieces. Thanks to Indiana Jones, pretty much. I mean, it changed things. I mean, once Gary Kurtz got out, that changed. And if you go back to it, Tony Gilroy is obviously more influenced by Empire mostly, but I think the pacing even of Star Wars, A New Hope, all those scenes in the boardroom in with Tarkin and stuff. I mean, that's the ISB scenes that we're seeing now with Yularen and obviously all the, you go around, oh yes, we're going to need to make sure the moisture evaporation in this area, blah, 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 and that's the sort of talk that we're used to. But it's real workers doing real things, and I think that's the key to this, is that it's a bit more grounded. And the groundedness is what's going to make it, I think, hold a lot more sway than, Mandalorian is an action show. It's a Western. And then Kenobi is really the sequel that we've been waiting for the prequels. So that was closure. Both of them are closure, I think. This is opening up a lot more stuff. And I think the same with what Rogue One had done. It opened up a portion of Star Wars that I think we've forgotten, but also one that was a lot more fun than we expected.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah, that in the sense of Mando, as Filoni and Favreau said, it is that Western samurai kind of vibe. We get that clearly. But you're right. It does feel like Andor, even though it's leading us to, for the character anyway, literally a dead end. But it's sort of story-wise, it's opening so many facets that could be, I think, if Lucasfilm play it right, and I hope they do, open up other facets of storytelling, because it's all heading to Scarif and Yavin, isn't it? It's all getting the characters in place. And we're seeing, I think, especially with, and we saw Gerrera a couple of episodes ago, which was fantastic. And we know he's itching and ready to go. We know Luthen's itching and ready to go. And Vel is ready to go, which was an interesting reveal this week. But Mothma, who's really said it early on, she's the most prominent public. She's there in the Senate, talking to a brick wall of people who don't want to hear it and just either paid off or too scared or genuinely loyal to the Empire. And she's sort of shouting in the wind. She's got the most to lose. Of course, we all think we've got the most to lose. If our story's over, it's all over, essentially, isn't it, to a degree? Yeah. But she's not there yet at the point where she's ready to push the button and take that brave step, that big move. And now, for years, you might have hypothesized the character to where she is now. We could have easily spitballed this as fans and talked it up, but we wouldn't have known what a dick her husband is and what a brat her daughter is. But they're her family and she loves them, so they're important and they matter. And just all the other elements and facets of what's going on behind Mothma, for example, Luthen, he's clearly been in this game for a long time. He's spinning a lot of plates. He's playing at least 2 aliases, as we know. So, there's so many levels. But I think I'd like to know what you think. I would imagine you'd agree that the show so far has given me the utmost confidence that all these threads will actually loop together into something and not just be dead ends that just, they never picked up on that in Andor, let's make a comic book out of it, or we need James Luceno to pull all these threads together and do an Adam Christopher and make sense of Rise of Skywalker by writing Shadow of the Sith kind of situation as fantastic. That's not a knock on the book or the film, I like them both, but you know what I'm getting at. I think Andor's going to tie up its own lattice and make it work for itself.
I think it will be its own little universe, and I think the thing is, obviously it ties into Rogue One, but the big thing is this is the kind of storytelling that you and I grew up with, particularly in the 90s with the great expanded universe. I mean, which brings us into a chat we'll get into in a sec, but I think the key thing is here, it's influenced by that storytelling. It's influenced by the pacing of Star Wars to a certain degree. Yeah, it's slow, but it's character driven. And I think that's the big key here is character driven is what Star Wars was always known for. Well, as you get into the sequel trilogy and obviously what they're doing now, there's a lot more action and adventure quota for that. And I think the influence of Gary Kurtz here really getting that character, or even Erwin Kirshner. It feels like Kirsch is behind all this stuff. I have that feeling.
It's funny you say that because I always used to say back in the day, and it doesn't hold up anymore, but I think it probably did when I said it, and it was years ago, was that Star Trek was always very good with the characters, with the personal relationships, with the, that side of things. You could watch a character like Picard go through, best of both worlds and come out the other side. And even though if that was made today, they would have explored it far more in depth, which they eventually did in First Contact. That was that side of the story, whereas Star Wars was more about the spectacle, more about the action. It was a bit more comic strip. Whereas now, over the last few years, especially now Andor, but even before then, in various arenas. You've delved more into the characters, and there's something about Andor I like in that maybe I wouldn't have liked so much before, because it's so real world, because it's clearly people, if that makes any sense, living a life in a galaxy where all this stuff's going on, that they have real world problems. You know, the relationship between Marva and Cassian is very familiar to a lot of mothers and sons, and you know, and B2 is the family dog. He just happens to talk, you know, and there's just all these little things that just feel real. That, you know, before we go to work this morning, let's go for breakfast. You know, it's just real world stuff. Now, you say about how that would attract older viewers like us. That's very much like the West End Games vibe that we had back in the day. And because Expanded Universe then was just really starting to take off, we were like in the thick of it with our West End stuff. But when when Heir to the Empire, Dark Empire, all that stuff came, and then they realised, hang on, people are loving this. There's an absolute opportunity to just go nuts with all of this stuff, and they did. That it just all fit, it all rolled together. You had something new every week or every month or whatever it was. Just fascinating stuff. So now I think they are reaping the benefits of that, not that era so much, but that tone, that vibe. You know, I think the thing that takes from the era the best is Bounty Hunters, Ethan Sachs comic. I think that's got that. I interviewed him at New York Comic Con, actually told him, and I think it took a second for him to cotton on to what I meant, but I totally meant it with love and respect. It's got that kinetic action feel in that comic. But this is, like you say, this has got that unified element to it of people just living in this galaxy where all these crazy things are happening out there somewhere.
100%. And of course brings us to, of course, Star Wars Tales of the Jedi, which is a fantastic mini series, and if anything evokes kind of in the pacing of it, and perhaps the size of these episodes, the length, very much like Gendy Star Wars, you know, the Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars, but with the Gendy series, obviously, I'm a huge fan of, and I like it just as much as what Filoni and friends did. But what I love about this one is we're, you know, getting little bits of Ahsoka. We're getting a great run on Dooku, which I thought was great. And, you know, Yaddle, come on, Yaddle, you shouldn't be talking like that. You should be talking like Yoda. I will say that. I think that was a misstep. Personally, I think that, you know, like we need to keep that mysticism with, you know, with Yoda. That mystery of that, you know, they just have different speech patterns. You know, acting she was, or whatever it is. You know, like it has to have that sort of feel. Now, having said that, why did they have to take the title of one of my favorite Dark Horse comics and call this Tales of the Jedi? Eula Keldroma's run with Nomi Sunrider, and of course that great story with him killing his brother, and of course Exar Kun, and you know, an amazing story. And let's just take that title. No, come on, no. I love what they did, but it's false advertising. I know everyone saw it and went, yeah, we're going to finally see it. And then all of a sudden Dooku pops up. Dooku again? We're treading water here, Star Wars fans. We are treading water on some great content, but we're treading water on stuff that I think we've seen before. It's time to spread our wings and try some new stuff. And I'm sure Disney's capable of giving us something other than Ahsoka, something other than Dooku, and something other than Mace Windu. We've done it. How many years have we done it now?
You know, there's a couple of really interesting points in there, and I've not considered it in quite the way you've said it, but I don't disagree. When it all sort of came out that they were getting Tales of the Jedi, I think it was a logo was found on a Lucasfilm Christmas present. Yeah. A couple of either last year or the year before. I think it was last year. So and it was pretty much the Dark Horse Tales of the Jedi logo as well. It was the same logo essentially. So that of course makes people think, wow. But I think when it comes to the real world of it, you know, the nuts and bolts, shareholders have to be accounted to for every penny we spend kind of thing. All those assets that were made for the Clone Wars, all that stuff that sits in files on computers where they've already got Anakin, they've already got Ahsoka, they've already got Mace and everything else. Obviously, they've had to make new models for a lot of stuff. Obviously, Dooku, there's changes to Dooku and so on. And obviously, it's a brand new Qui-Gon. But nevertheless, I would imagine for the most part, a lot of that already, waggling the air quotes, already exists. So there's a practical point there. And secondly, lots of little stories that that they probably never got a chance to adequately fold into what they were doing before. Some of it's set before the Clone Wars and before Phantom Menace, so they're brand new. I get that. That's fine. And your point on Yaddle, totally agree. I loved what Bryce Dallas Howard did with the voice, but if she'd have just had that vocal back to front Yoda thing, I do agree that would have worked really good. That's just a thing of that species. I agree. It would have been cool. I like what they did, but I do agree with what you say there. Nevertheless, that episode specifically, I think it was called The Sith Lord, was my favorite by a mile, because the Ahsoka one was fine. It's kind of cool. We saw it. It did feel a little bit like, well, we had Porgs, and years ago we had Ewoks, and now we've got Grogu. So what's the next cool baby character? I don't know. Let's do baby Ahsoka. Everybody loves Ahsoka. So there was a little bit of that about it, which I thought was a bit obvious. But the episodes were great. The Dooku stuff, for me, was the most engrossing and fascinating, as I say, especially that one, explaining exactly, you see it happen, how Kamino gets taken off the map, and why Jocasta Nu would be so confused by that. And just all the other little elements that just folded into a brilliant episode. But going back to your original point, because I am waffling like I usually do, it would be great if they had have gone way back and told stories and tales of the Jedi from back then, because it does feel a little bit like with High Republic, which is only sort of 250, 300 years before the episodes that we know. We've known for years that the Jedi and most things happened 25,000 years ago. The Force was discovered, the Jedi began, hyperspace and blasters, all that sort of stuff is thousands of years old in the Star Wars galaxy. So technology will grow at a crawl rather than a sprint, because it's all of it's been around and it's refining and tweaking and so on and so forth. Which always gets me when they make these massive technological leaps in Star Wars. It's like, nah. Never quite buy that. Never quite buy that. But nevertheless, if you'd have gone back to that era, it would have been absolutely fascinating. It would have been costly, I think, to build everything from the ground up, because I imagine, and you actually, more than a man, you see it in High Republic. There's planets of prominence in the High Republic that aren't the planets of prominence in the three trilogies that we're more familiar with. So, because, it's like here on Earth, go back a few centuries and other nations were the prominent nations that aren't the prominent nations now, or even didn't even exist. So in the Star Wars galaxy, there's planets that are prominent now that probably weren't even settled back then. It's fascinating. But yeah, I enjoyed Tales of the Jedi a lot. I really did. And I really hope they do some more. But I'd like to see that as an IP, if you like, expand in terms of time beyond just those characters. I think you could do one with Yoda and Ben and in the OT. You could do one with Kylo and Snoke in the sequel trilogy. There's options.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
I think interesting debate here, though, brings up something that Nathan Patrick Butler said on Leela Mullet the other night. This is an episode still to air yet. I think Nathan's fantastic. Give him a hoy out there for you. And he also said to say, g'day to Mr. Newbold as well. Now,
Excellent.
Now, of course, we know him very well for the Timeline Gold. Yep. He's pretty much the professor. I mean, he is a professor, but he is a professor of timelines, and he has done such a fantastic job to the point where Leland Chi himself went, hey, Nathan, is this right? Is this little event right? He'd always be reverting to the hard work that this guy had done. I mean, he's not technically working for Lucasfilm at the time, but he's done all the work they probably should have been doing if this was an extended timeline canon. So it brings up the debate, and it's something he said he's given up all that stuff because he believes nothing's canon. Everything is a valued story, and it should be taken for what it's worth. Now, of course, there's the debate about the Ahsoka novel that's been here for a while, considered canon, and it was overwritten, of course, by the show. Yeah, I mean, little bits and pieces, but still, it brings up the debate. Is the Star Wars stuff that the story group and what they've said canon, or do we take canon as TV shows override everything still?
It's a tough one. I think they boxed themselves into a corner when they very publicly said that everything is canon. Books, comics, novels, anything is canon. And especially the comics, I think, where they have very nicely, Marvel do a beautiful job of having that opening page, and it is essentially the old classic, yellow on black Starscape scroll up of what happened last issue, and then underneath it lists all the contributors, including story group members. So know that the story group have had at least cast an eye over this story, if not delved into the depths to make sure it all makes sense. That's great. That gives me, it's an extra little tick in the box for when you're reading a Star Wars comic, and which we do regularly on Fantha. One of my jobs this afternoon is to finish reviewing Bounty Hunters. So, there's always something on the go. So to say that gives, and I suppose you've got to put it into the context of when that was said. You're going back quite a few years now. Legends EU becomes Legends, and that sort of sidesteps, and it's quite clear they're cherry picking quite sensibly. Matt Martin said this years ago. Don't think it's all gone. We are going to take elements from that and use them because they're out there in the ether. You go back to the 90s and it was all Mara Jade, Boba Fett, and Darth Vader. Shadows of the Empire comes out. It's like everyone's going loopy about Shadows. People get snippy about Shadows now, but that was a massive deal when that came out. And so they've got this whole other sandbox, if you want to describe it like that. So I think they did make I guess an error of judgment in that sense, because now, for example, issue 1 of the Kanan comic tells the story of, it's Depa Billaba and it's Caleb Dume, and they're on the run, and the clone troopers are hunting them down. It's all happening at night. And then they sort of recreate that on screen, and it's happening in the daytime. And so there's just lots of little elements that, when they came back to it in the Clone Wars, just, I wish you'd just stuck to how it was in the comic, because the comics there, it's a great comic series. It was such a shame that comic was cancelled. It was a brilliant comic. But it's there, and it's that's how we understand it. And then, they come and recreate it and they change it. And now with this, from what I understand, I never did read the Ahsoka novel, so I don't know the specific details. But from what I understand, the broad strokes are there, but certain elements, the specific elements have changed. And it's like, if you're going to go there in a 6-part, 15-minute animated episodes, why change it? Why not just honor what was in the book? I don't get that, because all they've done now is light a little. It's not like we're pulling our hair out outraged about it, but as fans, of the canonical thought process, and a lot of people out there, it's like Andor at the moment. People either love it or think it's the most boring thing ever. It's the canon debate's the same. Some people, like me, I like the what's the word? The comfort, I guess. I like the comfort of knowing that these stories take place in a timeline. It's considered, it's thought through. It's not just splurt it out there and let's say it happened then. And then all of a sudden you find out that, one guy's got Darth Vader's executor in the mid-rim, and another story that's happening at the same time on screen, you've got the executor in the outer rim. And all of a sudden, somebody like Nathan, or we might spitball it, or somebody else will go, hang on, that don't make sense. And then they've got to suddenly quickly go, well, for the 10 minutes between that story and that story, he hyperspace jumped across the galaxy to there and then came back. Things like that. So I'm making silly examples, but you know what I'm getting at. There's a thread. Star Wars always did that so well, in that all these stories hung together. Star Trek didn't worry about it. They'd got the movies, they'd got the TV shows. The books and comics were based on Star Trek. They weren't Star Trek. They were something else. And I think there was always a little bit, I could be wrong, but my feeling was always with Star Wars was if they'd have come out and said that so overtly, they would have worried that a lot of people, bearing in mind Trek was Paramount. Trek was with a big, it was owned by Paramount. Star Wars was never owned by Fox. It was released by Fox. Star Wars was owned by Lucasfilm, a little independent company. And so they would have thought, well, do we even want to give people the opportunity to go, it's not actually happening, is it? It's just based on Star Wars. That's not really what Han and Leia did. So, so they made sure that it felt essential. And of course, it's all essential. And if you enjoy it, it's essential. And people who have got no time for canon are no less right than I'm right, or no less wrong than I'm wrong. It's just all personal opinion. But I like the linkage and the threads and the way it holds together. And I do think they've just made a slight misstep, especially when it's something like this. And it's Filoni again. You know, it happened with Even Peel. It happened with the Caleb Dune scene at the start of, in Clone Wars Season 7. Now it's happened in Tales of the Jedi. He is kind of, if you want to be pernickety about it, he's kind of a repeat offender on this,
Yes.
So
back to Karen Travis. I mean, great novels too, by the way, folks. If you haven't, Republic Commando, I mean, woof. Damn good series. And of course, we're looking back. I mean, how many years? I mean, almost 15 years or something like that. Yeah. Whatever it is. But great novels, which were, again, Filoni overrode big time. Oh, well, George did too, by the way. It's a big part there. But great series of novels which went into, I do believe, the Imperial Commandos or whatever they were, the Imperial Special Group. But this is the thing, folks. Books will always be overwritten. It's sad, unless it's, a book-written franchise, like something like Frank Herbert's Dune or something like that. Obviously, that's its main format. But when it's movies, TV shows, I think, sadly, it's going to go that way. But we were sold a different thing. We were sold that this is all canon.
Yeah, and I think that was the mistake. I think that really was the mistake. You can word things in a certain way, and I've seen a lot of people online that, and there hasn't been, and I don't suppose there ever will be, sort of an official line on this. But I think people online go, well, it's Tales of the Jedi, so it's a bit like the Legends of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
where it's like this isn't actually what happened. This is other people viewing what happened and telling you what they saw, which is kind of what history is anyway. But when we watch Star Wars, we're not watching history. We're not watching what the winner wrote. We're not watching the propaganda. We're the fly on the wall, to steal from AC/DC. We're the fly on the wall watching what happened. And so we want to see what happened. We don't want any filter on that. We want to see what happens. And I know that sounds probably a bit poncy because it's all silly space wizards and spaceships and such. But, if you've been a fan of it for a long time, and a long time can be 5 years to a 10-year-old or 40 years to a 50-year-old. But you know what I'm saying? It kind of matters that they want to respect that. And I would say 98% of the time, they absolutely do respect that, because I know so many of the authors and writers get a massive kick out of dropping a cool, not an overt Easter egg, but a cool Easter egg in, or something that's going to make fans go, whoa, look at that. They like... episode 1 of Mandalorian, when it's clearly Danny and Cheeto and Rick Jewell in carbonite blocks on Mando's ship on the Razor Crest, things like that, where you'd kind of have to know it to know it. And if you don't know it, you'll see the chatter on Twitter or Instagram, and then you'll Google it and go to Wikipedia and look it up and go, oh, that's actually really cool. Things like that are wonderful. But as you say, they open themselves up to completely unnecessary criticism when something like this happens and it gets picked up, and then you drill into it a little bit, which I've got to say I haven't. I only know the cliff notes on this particular issue, but when you drill into it and it's like, oh, actually they have changed that. And there's E.K. Johnson, for example, who wrote the Ahsoka book and then did that Padme trilogy, and who's still involved with Star Wars. And it must be deflating for a writer who, I know these writers understand that these things happen and that things will get overwritten and changed, but it must be deflating when 1 minute you're thinking, I wrote that book and defined that moment, and then something comes out that changes it. And it's not an insignificant character. It's Ahsoka Tano. It's a big character who's about to go into the TV show that's out next year. Lots going on. So yeah, I think they could have diverted around that issue, I think.
I think so too. I've got to say, there's something that I personally think should happen in the second season of Andor. And this is something I was, after watching a few Paul W.S. Anderson films, is we need to get the buddies back together. We need to get, and Jason Isaacs needs to get back in there too. I'm talking about, of course, Sean Pertwee and Jason Isaacs. We need to get them into Andor somewhere.
That'd be interesting. I interviewed Sean Pertwee a few years ago, funny enough. And weirdly, the interview never saw the light of day. I interviewed him about Pennyworth, and never managed to get that anywhere, sadly.
He's a good guy. I like him.
Yeah, it was nice to meet him. It was very cool to meet him. He was a good guy, very pleasant and giving of his time. But nevertheless, to see those guys in there would be kind of cool, because I think Cassian, as we said at the top of the show, really, you're watching him develop into a leader and somebody who'll quite not happily, but quite ready to make really tough decisions. And that holds more weight because it's one thing's Mothma, I'll pick her as an example, Mothma making decisions. We know she's led a politician's life and she's coming at this conflict from a completely different angle. I don't think anyone, if she does, great, but I don't think anyone's expecting her to pick up a Bowie knife and a AK-47, because we know there's AK-47s in Andor, and actually go into it, hand to hand. If she does, great, but that's not the expectation of her. Her skill set is different. She's the kind of person who will stand at that briefing room table from A New Hope and watch the Death Star battle. Love to know where she was at that point, and watch the Death Star battle and be able to be detached and go, send in Blue Squadron to cover Red Squadron. Well, Blue Squadron will all get wiped out. Yeah, but it gives Red Squadron a chance to take out the Death Star. Somebody's got to make that call and be impassive enough to do it. That takes a certain kind of quality. But Cassian is on the, Cassian's there on Scarif. He's on the ground. He's making the decisions in real time and carrying them out. It's a different skill set. It's no more or no less, because it's all got to work together, but it's a different skill set. So I just think it's really interesting to see how all these things play out together.
He's more Solo than Solo. That's something that Nathan brought up the other day, and I agree. He kind of is. Like, he's everything that we were sold on Solo is rubbish, because he is the Luke Skywalker goody two shoes. He's putting up a front, and maybe he believed that front eventually, but which I kind of, to be honest, I always thought he was. He's a bit of a showman. But
I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you, just to jump in on that. I think as kids, we watched Indiana Jones. And we saw Indy be the everyman who could do it, who could get scrappy and figure things out and do all that stuff. And I just think as kids, especially kind of our age, we almost merged Indy and Han Solo together, because Han Solo is a goof. We can see it now as adults. Now we're older than Harrison Ford was when he played it, Han Solo back in the day. You look at that and you go, it was a bit of a goof. And it was a good pilot. No doubt he was a good pilot. And he was good with the blaster. We know he was good with the blaster. And he was a decent smuggler. But you listen to Han Solo, it's like Han Solo's got Paul Heyman as his advocate every minute, telling you he's the best pilot, he's the best smuggler, he's the best gunman. He's got a girl in every port, whatever. He was his own best salesman. If Han hadn't got Chewie, he'd have never got off Mimban, let alone done anything else. So, it's fascinating to see that. And that is a really, really good point, actually, in that in many ways, Cassian is actually, that guy. And that's the beauty of Andor, going back to Andor, is that we're watching it happen. We're watching him figure it out, and we're watching it happen. That's why, if we had another 10 episodes of season 1, at the pace we're getting it, I'm on the edge of my seat watching it, just loving it.
Hi there, this is Mike Quinn. I played Nine Num in Return of the Jedi and the new trilogy, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Now, folks, we're going to have a bit of fun. There's something that I always told, Mark, we do on here on the Fantha From Down Under. We like to have a bit of a gag, a bit of a laugh, but even a bit of a test, a bit of exam, a bit of a quiz. Brought to you by, of course, Disney's own Top Trumps. Yes.
Oh, good grief.
The Star Wars quiz. Are you ready, sir, to pick your card? Here we go.
Never ready.
Never ready. Okay. I'm sure these are fairly general Star Wars questions. So
you say that until they get 10 in a row wrong, and then it's just disastrous.
How many crew members can an ATST hold?
Well, could that be a trick question? I mean, obviously got the pilot and the co-pilots. That's 2 standing, but Chewie and the Ewoks were stood behind them. So I'm wondering if it's. I want to say 2. I'd like to say 2.
Correct.
It's 2. Yeah, okay.
It is 2. All right, I'm going to pick a random card here. We'll do the best of 5. Here we go.
Okay.
How it is. Okay, here we go. All right, so we have another one. Which scavenger species sold C-3PO and R2-D2 to Owen Lars in A New Hope? Oh, come on, it's a giveaway.
That's the Jawas.
The Jawas. Ooh, teeny. There we are. Okay, so we got
They are teeny, yeah.
Oh, they are. All right, surely there's a hard one here somewhere. Who defeats Stormtrooper FN2199? Is it A, Chewbacca, B, Finn, or C, Han Solo?
Well, I'm guessing Finn. I'm guessing that's the dude that he has the little face-off with the power stick on Takodana.
The answer is Han Solo. I think Han Solo must shoot him after all that little saber battle that he has there.
There you go.
Okay, so so far we've got, what is it? 2 out of 5. There we go. Okay, here we go. There's a lot of sequel questions here, folks. All right. What is the name of the first order ship where Poe Dameron is captured? Is it the Equalizer, the Finalizer, or the Summarizer?
It's the Finalizer, I believe.
Correct. It is the Finalizer. Folks, he's doing all right. Only one wrong so far. I think he's on a good path.
My Google skills are impeccable.
What does Han Solo call Jabba the Hutt before they are hurled into the Sarlacc?
Filthy piece of worm-ridden filth? No, slimy piece of worm-ridden filth.
Perfect. 4 out of 5, mate. Well done. You win top trumps for today here on, of course, Fantha From Down Under. Now, folks, obviously you can catch this show on, of course, the great Fantha Tracks Radio. Best place to check it out, of course, is on SoundCloud, and where, of course, you got Making Tracks as well, the main flag show of this channel. Tell us a little bit about Making Tracks.
Oh, Making Tracks. We literally this week posted our 150th studio episode. So what we do, because we get out and about a lot, we're out and about this weekend at Croydon and loads of guests there. So that'll be a fun weekend with myself and Paul Naylor and Jonathan Hipkiss, friend of the site. So that'll be a fun weekend. But yeah, we get out and about and do lots of stuff. So we have our studio episodes, which is literally me and Mark, much like we are now, summarising the week's news. So we've hit 150 of those. But I think in total there's about 230 episodes, probably 240 actually. So lots of Making Tracks episodes out there. But yeah, it's great fun. It's myself and Mark Mulcaster, who's the commanding officer of the Rebel Legion UK Elstree base. So Mark gets out and about a lot as well. Obviously, both quite like this Star Wars thing. So on weeks when there's episodes out, like at the moment we're in the midst of Andor, we do what we call a reaction chat. Hopefully, ideally, the day after, usually over the weekend, because we're both slammed with stuff. So we have a reaction chat for episode 9 coming up very soon. And yeah, it's great fun. Mark's a good bloke, and we catch up as often as we can. In fact, I saw him a couple of nights ago. A couple of nights ago, we had a Disney event down in London, and we caught up down there. So great fun. But of course, there's other shows on the network. There's yourself, our second longest running show on the network. Which has been going since, 2018 now? Late 2018, I think we've been going. I think,
yeah. It's either late 2017. No, would have been early 2018 actually.
Yeah,
because I remember I gave up Oz fans in the late 2017, and then you said, "Nah, don't give it up. Do something else."
Yep. That's worked out okay, isn't it?
Yeah. Worked out okay, all right.
Oz fans, just on that topic for quickly, you did a show called Jogcast, and then you did Oz fans, and it was great when we first got chatting to go on both those shows and talk about all sorts of stuff. And I'm so glad that it coalesced into this, and of course all the other stuff you're doing with Lethal Mullet. So it's great that that's all progressed the way it has. But yeah, we've got your show, we've got this show as we're on now. We've got Cannon Fodder, our literature show, which is undergoing a bit of a sort of a turnaround at the moment. Brian's sort of working out some new ideas on that. But in the meantime, we put our author interviews on there. So we had a bunch of stuff from New York Comic Con recently. This week, there's a Survivor Cordova interview ahead of Convergence coming out, High Republic Phase 2 book. So that's on its way. Yeah, so she was lovely. It was such a nice interview to do. We've got Planet Leia with Johanna and Claire. So there's an episode of that imminent as well, talking about the politics of Star Wars. Collecting Tracks with Chris Leddy and Richard Hutchinson. He put together this show with Chris, who does a show called Six Scale Scavengers, looking at all the sort of the Hot Toys, Six Scale stuff. So that's actually the topic of this latest episode, looking at Hot Toys. So that's fascinating. There's loads of stuff I knew nothing about Hot Toys. So that was really interesting. We've got Desert Planet Discs with Carl and Greg, Darth Elvis. You know Greg from Mullet and Kilt.
And Mooncat Drums.
Exactly. So they talk about the music of Star Wars, but not the music of Star Wars in the sense that David Collins would talk about the music of Star Wars, about the fan-written Star Wars music. There's loads of bands out there doing Star Wars-themed music. And that's what Carl and Greg talk about, along with the latest news. So that's out every 6 weeks on a Friday night, part of our Friday night rotation. We've got Start Your Engines. That's me and Paul Naylor talking about the vehicles of Star Wars. So I think we're about 4 episodes in now. I know that we're recording at least 2 episodes next week, looking at some more vehicles there. So that's huge fun because Paul, as you know, is a wonderful, wonderful, witty and funny guy. In fact, did I hear you say that Paul's going to be your co-host on Fantha on a forthcoming episode?
I definitely want him on. So we have to get Paul. If you're listening right now, mate, grab yourself a mic. We are going to be chatting on, what is it? It'll be December episode. There you go.
That's perfect, because this is completely, us saying this publicly is making him feel so awful that he can't say no. So this is the blackmail tactics. There's a lot going on. I've got this horrible feeling I've missed a show out. I don't think I have, but I'm pretty sure that's everything. If I've forgotten one, I'm very sorry. But yeah, it's busy. It's always busy.
You have forgotten one show, and it's a big show, folks. And of course, this is a show that tells you all about the great sagas of space. And of course, we're talking about Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast. And of course, the Lethal Mullet Network, where I do believe I know a co-host on there that's a good fella.
Well, I would have no idea who that is, but I mean, you have had you've had James Semple on as a co-host, who's a wonderful fella and ridiculously talented.
And of course, we've also had Rob Wainfer on there for a gag, and he's always a good laugh.
Rob's one of the nicest guys out in fandom. He really is. And the Bearded Trio it gets so much love from people who follow it and read it, and quite rightfully so. So yes, Rob's a top bloke.
Although he knows the gags by now. He knows I'm going to, because Jaws is one of his favorite movies. I said,
yeah,
what if you had Michael Caine in that? Oh, he was in the fourth movie, the best of the sequels. He's like, not again, please. And what if Sean turned up in the fifth one? No. What shark? Is there a shark in the water? Well, come on, let's take it out.
That's probably why he never said yes to doing that film.
Michael Caine versus sharks, still to this day. That's the revenge. Well, it bought his mum a house. I mean, that's pretty damn good if you're going to use the money from that. I mean, he's never seen it, apparently. So
smart man.
Oh, smart man. Well, folks, that's it for episode number 64, Cassian Anderrrr, and many other things. And from Australia to Brummy, Mark Newbold, buddy, thank you so much for being on.
It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to doing this for a little while now. It's been so busy trying to get our calendars to sort of meet at a docking port somewhere. So I'm glad we've managed to do it. It's been brilliant.
It's been awesome. And to all you Star Wars fans out there, make sure you're checking out FanthaTracks.com for, of course, all your Star Wars news in a single file. Thanks for listening to the Fantha From Down Under. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit FanthaTracks.com or check out the free Fantha Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@FanthaTracks.com. You can also find me over at Fandom Podcast Network, where I host The Lethal Mullet, Making Treks with Mark Newbold, and Mullet and Kilt with Greg Robertson. That's right, Darth Elvis. And you can find me on Twitter at The Lethal Mullet. You can comment, like, share any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fantha Tracks intro, and Mark Daniel and, of course, Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember to tune in to our Fantha Tracks news show, Good Morning Tatooine, live Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, and 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. May the Force be with you.
Thanks for listening. Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Cannon Fodder.